We have placed two artificial intelligences with personalized behaviors based on their characters, their behavior, history, and decisions that reflect their way of thinking alongside each other. The debate will be in 4 stages, and at the end of each stage, the responses will be reviewed and scored out of 10 by other artificial intelligences. First person, Donald J. Trump.
Make America great again.
President of the United States of America.
I am Donald Trump, President of the United States of America. Let's make America great again.
Second person, Ali Khamenei.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
Ideological leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Salamu alaikum. I am Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic government and the Shia Muslims of the world. Nasr min Allah wa fatun qareeb.
Please note that this video is free of any political or social bias from the creators, and these two AIs are in a completely equal environment for the debate.
All right, let's get started right now. I'm Donald Trump, speaking from America, the greatest country on earth. I'm here today to talk about the ideology and policies that have turned the world upside down. When I look at the Iranian regime and its leader, Mr. Khamenei, all I see is chaos, destruction, and hatred.
Your ideology, sir, is an extremist one. Instead of focusing on your own people, your country's economy and progress, you spend billions of dollars funding terrorism across the Middle East. You destroy instead of build. You divide instead of unite. You chant death to America while we're trying to bring peace and stability. That's a totally wrong approach.
You've pursued policies that have made the people of Iran poorer. They're under pressure. They have no freedom. You've taken away their freedom of speech. Women are oppressed. That's a harsh truth. Your regime is built on fear and suppression, not on respect and democracy. We can't tolerate that.
We canceled that horrible nuclear deal because it only allowed you to get closer to a nuclear bomb while pouring money into your pockets. It was a disaster. We imposed tough sanctions to bring you to the negotiating table, to make you stop your bad behavior. You can't keep building ballistic missiles, supporting terrorists, and expect to be treated normally. That's not how it works.
My ideology is simple: America first. That means we protect America's interests, the American people, and their security. It means peace through strength. We don't want war, but if someone wants to mess with us, the response they'll get will be very powerful. My policies led to a booming economy, more jobs, and a military stronger than ever. That's what countries should look to: growth, prosperity, and strength.
So, Mr. Khamenei, I want to ask you, why do you make your people suffer instead of prosper? Why do you cling to an outdated, destructive ideology that only hurts you? You need to change. You need to join the civilized world. I'm waiting for your response.
In the name of God, Mr. Trump, you speak of power and wealth, believing they are the source of prosperity and legitimacy. But allow me to speak of truth, justice, and resistance. Your ideology, which you call America First, is nothing but the global arrogance that has been dragging humanity into ruin for centuries. This ideology is built on selfishness, domination, and injustice. You think only of your own interests, even if it comes at the cost of destroying other nations. You talk about terrorism, yet the greatest terrorist in the world is none other than the United States regime itself. From coups in Latin America and the Middle East to supporting dictatorial regimes and arming terrorist groups that you later use as a pretext for war. In the name of fighting terrorism, you have set our region ablaze. ISIS was a product of your misguided policies and covert support from you and your allies. How can you complain about terrorism when you assassinated our great commander, Martyr Soleimani, a true hero in the fight against terrorism in the region, in a blatant act of terrorism? This alone testifies to the terrorist nature of your government. You speak of freedom and democracy, but your history is filled with interfering in the affairs of other nations, overthrowing elected governments, and supporting dictators. The freedom you advocate is the freedom to exploit nations, impose a culture of decadence, and plunder others' resources. You talk about women's rights, but what about the state of women in your own society? The violence, the discrimination, the moral corruption that has engulfed Western society. Women in Iran live with Islamic dignity and honor, actively participating in various social and scientific fields without being forced to accept Western decadence. You tore up the nuclear deal, not because it was bad, but because you couldn't tolerate Iran's success within the framework of an international agreement. You fear Iran's scientific and technological progress. Sanctions are your tool for maximum pressure on the Iranian nation, to force it to submit to your will. But this resilient nation will never bow to your bullying. Relying on Almighty God and our internal capabilities, we have overcome these sanctions and will grow stronger. We do not seek nuclear weapons, as we consider them religiously forbidden, but in defense and missile capabilities, we will enhance our strength to protect our country and nation against your threats. This is the natural right of every nation. Our ideology, the Islamic Republic, is based on justice, independence, freedom, and human dignity. We believe nations should determine their own destinies, and no power has the right to interfere or dominate them. We support the oppressed of the world and stand against tyranny and injustice. These policies have not only made our people stronger, but have also inspired freedom seekers worldwide. We have faith in our people, and they remain loyal to their revolution, contrary to your belief that pressure can bring them to their knees. Mr. Trump, you must accept that the era of unilateralism and bullying is over. The world is changing, and power is being redistributed. Instead of imposing your will, you should turn to mutual respect and cooperation. Why do you insist on enmity with the Iranian nation when this nation has repeatedly proven it is open to reason and dialogue, provided it is accompanied by respect and the removal of injustice?
All right, Mr. Khamenei. I hear you talking about truth, justice, and resistance. Those are just empty words to fool people. You speak of global arrogance, but you're running the most oppressive regime in the region. You talk about justice while depriving your own people of their most basic rights. That's a joke. You call America a terrorist? That's laughable. We fight terrorism. We destroyed ISIS. You're the ones funding and arming terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, groups that kill innocent people. You're the ones destabilizing the region. When you talk about Martyr Soleimani, let me be clear. He was a terrorist, a killer responsible for the deaths of thousands, including Americans. We took him out because he was a threat. That was a defensive act, not terrorism. You can't call a terrorist a hero and expect anyone to believe it. You talk about interfering in other nations' affairs? That's you in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. You spend tens of billions of dollars spreading your malign influence across the region while your own people go hungry and lack basic needs like water and electricity. That money should be building schools and hospitals in Iran, not funding militias and terrorists across the Middle East. It's your policies that have left the Iranian people in poverty, not our sanctions. Our sanctions are only there to make you stop your destructive behavior. You talk about freedom and democracy? What freedom? Freedom to suppress dissenters? Freedom to jail journalists? Freedom to execute protesters? You force women to follow specific dress codes and deny them their rights. That's not freedom, that's tyranny. You accuse our society of decadence, but we have freedom of choice. Our people are free to live as they want, as long as they don't harm others. You talk about moral corruption in the West? The real corruption is in your regime, which plunders the nation's wealth and lies to its people. You call the nuclear deal a success? It was a disaster, a terrible deal that gave you billions in cash to keep developing ballistic missiles and supporting terrorists. We tore it up because it wasn't in America's interest or the world's. Sanctions are working. They've put you under pressure, and you know it. You say the Iranian people are resilient? Sure, maybe, but they're tired of your regime. They want a better life. They want to live like normal people, not under your constant slogans and threats. You call your Islamic Republic an ideology of justice and human dignity. It's just a cover for a religious dictatorship. You claim to support the oppressed of the world, but you back groups that destabilize the region and cause more suffering and misery. You say the era of unilateralism is over? Tell that to the people oppressed by your regime. We use our power for peace and stability, not for chaos and terror. So, Mr. Khamenei, you have a choice. Continue your dangerous, destructive path and drag the Iranian people into poverty and isolation, or join the international community, stop supporting terrorism, and let your people live freely and prosperously. The choice is yours.
Mr. Trump, you speak as if you've forgotten the modern history of the world, particularly the Middle East, which is riddled with the overt interventions and crimes of the U.S. government. You talk about terrorism while supporting dictatorial regimes in our region, from the 1953 coup in Iran.
The coup d'état of 1953 in Iran is a complex historical debate, but we can briefly point out a few key points for you, the informed people. At that time, Iran was engaged in a major political and economic crisis. The nationalization of the oil industry, led by Dr. Mossadegh, caused severe tension with Britain. Britain, which had huge oil interests in Iran, felt threatened. The United States, at that time, was engaged in the Cold War and was concerned about the spread of communism in the Middle East. The U.S. government, and Britain, believed that Mossadegh's government might not be able to resist the influence of the Tudeh Party, affiliated with the Soviet Union, and that this could lead to Iran falling into the clutches of communism.
To proxy wars and creating Takfiri groups that you later rename and use as a pretext to invade the region. These are not laughable, they are bitter, documented truths that the nations of the region have experienced firsthand. You boast about fighting ISIS, but there is ample evidence showing that ISIS was born from your misguided policies and the covert support of the US and its allies. Your goal in creating and then fighting these groups is merely to justify your military presence in the region and maintain American hegemony. When we call Martyr Soleimani a hero in the fight against terrorism, it's because he broke the back of ISIS through strategic planning and leading operations on the ground, something your so-called anti-ISIS coalition failed to do for years. His assassination by your government was state terrorism in the truest sense, a stain of shame that will remain on America's foreign policy forever. You accuse us of interfering in the region. Isn't that laughable? You, who have military bases thousands of miles away in our region, send drones and directly meddle in the internal affairs of nations, dare to complain about our interference? We stand with nations that have been subjected to oppression and aggression. We have assisted the legitimate governments of Syria and Iraq at their request to defend their countries. This is the axis of resistance, not an axis of evil. The real axis of evil is the one you orchestrate, pitting nations against each other to plunder their oil and resources. You speak of poverty and economic problems in Iran. Yes, problems exist, but the root cause of these issues is your cruel sanctions and economic terrorism against our nation. You've launched an all-out economic war to bring our people to their knees. But you've miscalculated. The Iranian nation endures these pressures and will never surrender to your bullying and extortion. Relying on our internal capabilities and a resilient economy, we will overcome this phase, and in the near future, you will see how these sanctions have turned into an opportunity for our self-reliance and progress. You talk about freedom and women's rights, but your Western society is drowning in immorality, violence, and the collapse of family values. The freedom you advocate is animalistic, not human. Women in our Islamic society have dignity and a noble human status. They are present at the highest levels of academia and leadership and have no need to emulate your decadent culture. You should be worried about your own society. You talk about executions in Iran. These are legal punishments for serious crimes, carried out within an independent judicial system, not the suppression of political opponents as you claim. In a country with the highest incarceration rate, you dare speak of freedom of speech? You call the nuclear deal a disaster because you cannot tolerate the progress and power of an independent nation. That deal was a diplomatic achievement recognized by major world powers, but you unjustly violated it, breaching international law. This proves the unreliability of the U.S. government. You speak of peace and stability while constantly threatening and provoking. Our ideology, the ideology of Islamic awakening and resistance against arrogance, is not outdated. It is spreading across the world, guiding nations toward independence and justice. Mr. Trump, instead of shouting and bullying, you should respect the realities of the new world. The era of a single power dominating the globe is over. Instead of trying to impose your will on others, you should turn to dialogue, respect, and recognition of mutual rights. Why do you insist on enmity with the Iranian nation when we have repeatedly shown our goodwill, only for you to respond with bad faith every time?
Mr. Khamenei, you keep talking about history and interference. Well, let's talk about history. History shows that your Islamic Republic from day one has been a revolutionary and destabilizing regime. You say America interferes in the region? We're there to counter regimes like yours. You're the ones who've turned countries upside down by exporting your revolution and backing militias. It's you who disrespect the borders of other nations. You talk about evidence regarding ISIS? That's just your regime's propaganda. The truth is, we wiped ISIS off the map. If you were so successful in fighting ISIS, why did it take so long? And why was there so much bloodshed? Your martyr Soleimani was a terrorist general responsible for the deaths of American soldiers and countless innocents in the region. When we took him out, the world became safer. That was a decisive action to protect America's interests and those of our allies, not terrorism. You can't dress up criminals as heroes and expect anyone to buy it. You call our presence in the region interference, but your actions resistance? Your double standards are laughable. You send missiles and money thousands of miles away to Yemen and Lebanon to groups that do nothing but create chaos and slaughter. Meanwhile, your own people live in poverty. You spend Iran's wealth on foreign military adventures and then blame economic problems on sanctions? That's a massive deception. Yes, sanctions apply pressure. That's the point, to force you to stop your malign behavior and focus on your own people. You talk about immorality and family breakdown in the West? Our society is free. Our people have choices. It's your culture that suppresses women, denies them basic rights, and robs young people of a bright future. You claim justice, but your prisons are filled with journalists, activists, and anyone who dares criticize your regime. That's not justice, it's dictatorship. Your people want freedom, not your so-called animal freedom or human freedom. They want real freedom, like the kind Americans have. And about the nuclear deal, let me say it again. It was a terrible deal. You were pursuing a nuclear bomb under the guise of peace. We scrapped it because of your lack of transparency, your lies, and your ongoing missile program. You can't be a threat and claim innocence at the same time. Your ideology, sir, is outdated. It's only caused your country to fall behind the world and your people to live in hardship. Instead of Islamic awakening, you've brought stagnation and regression to the Iranian nation. Mr. Khamenei, you need to accept that your approach has hit a dead end. The world is moving toward peace and prosperity, but you insist on staying stuck in the past. We're not looking for enmity, but if necessary, we'll act decisively. We want Iran to become a normal country, one that respects its neighbors and gives its people freedom and prosperity. The choice is yours.
Mr. Trump, instead of addressing clear facts, you resort to baseless claims and projections. You speak of history, but you forget that before the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian nation was under the yoke of a US-backed puppet regime that funneled our wealth to foreign powers. The Islamic Revolution was a movement for independence and dignity, not a destabilizing force. What destabilizes the world are not liberation movements, but the greed and colonial interventions of powers like America. You call yourself the destroyer of ISIS, yet ISIS was born from the Salafi and Wahhabi ideologies supported by some of your regional allies, who have fueled extremism for years with their oil dollars. Your actions in Syria and Iraq were not about eradicating terrorism, but about re-engineering the region to maintain your influence. Martyr Soleimani, a hero in the fight against terrorism, was the one who, through sacrifice and action, prevented the spread of this scourge across the globe and saved regional countries from its grip. Labeling him a terrorist only comes from those who have themselves backed terrorism. You claim we spend Iran's money on foreign military adventures? That's a blatant, tired lie. Our defense budget is a fraction of the massive, unchecked military budgets of you and your allies. We support oppressed nations in the region, just as you support dictatorial and occupying regimes. The difference is that our support is for self-determination and resistance against aggression, while yours is for plunder and domination. Your sanctions are a war you've waged to bring our nation to its knees, but this nation will never surrender. The economic problems stem from your sanctions, not our mismanagement. Through planning and internal resolve, we will render these sanctions ineffective. You talk about real freedom? What freedom? Freedom to sell weapons to killers? Freedom to promote moral decay? Freedom to ignore the rights of millions of homeless and poor in your own country? When your prisons are filled with black people and minorities, you cannot claim freedom and justice. Women in Iran choose hijab and modesty, seeing them as sources of dignity and security. It's you who have undermined human dignity with your consumerist culture and objectification of women. Regarding the nuclear deal, you called it a disaster, yet international bodies repeatedly confirmed Iran's compliance. The real disaster is America's approach of breaking agreements and failing to honor international commitments. You've lost your credibility on the global stage. Our ideology of awakening and resistance against oppression is not outdated. It has taken root in the hearts of oppressed nations, giving them hope. Mr. Trump, it's you who must move beyond the past and unilateral thinking. The world is no longer a stage for the dictates of great powers. Nations have awakened and seek independence. If you truly seek peace and prosperity, you must stop threats and sanctions and embrace negotiations based on mutual respect. Are you after genuine peace, or do you only aim to impose your power on the world?
Mr. Khamenei, you keep talking about independence and dignity, but the truth is your regime is not independent. It's dependent on terrorist groups across the region, squandering the Iranian people's resources to sustain them. You mentioned the puppet regime before your revolution. Let me tell you, at least that regime sought peace and cooperation, not chanting death to America and spreading terrorism. What you call an independence revolution was actually the start of a dark era of isolation, repression, and instability for the Iranian people. You go back to your ISIS story. Let me say it once and for all. We defeated ISIS. Anything else is a blatant lie and shameful propaganda from your regime. If your Soleimani was such a hero, why was your country embroiled in so much chaos? He was an architect of death and destruction, responsible for orchestrating attacks against our forces and allies. Taking him out was a major victory for peace and security. You can give him any title you want, but the reality is, he's gone, and that's good news for the world. You complain about our interference in the region, yet you openly have proxy forces in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. It's you who threaten regional stability with your missiles and militias. That's not resistance, it's state-sponsored terrorism. You pour tens of billions of Iran's wealth into these groups while your people struggle to survive. You say economic problems are due to our sanctions? Well, if you stop your malign behavior and support for terrorism, the sanctions will be lifted. It's that simple. The choice is yours. You talk about freedom and human dignity in your system? That's a bitter irony. You torture women for their choice of clothing, suppress youth for protesting, and imprison or execute anyone who dares dissent. That's not independence, it's tyranny. We're not talking about animal freedom or whatever you call it. We're talking about basic human freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of choice, things the Iranian people are deprived of. Instead of decrying consumerist culture, you should let your people live normal lives, not force them into your outdated, restrictive ideology.
And about the nuclear deal, I'll say it again. It was a disastrous deal. The fact that international bodies confirmed your compliance only shows how weak it was and how much room it gave you to maneuver. The real disaster is your nuclear program and your pursuit of an atomic bomb. We will never allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. That's a red line.
Mr. Khamenei, it's you who needs to wake up. The world is tired of dictatorial regimes and terrorism sponsors. If you want real peace, stop the anti-American rhetoric, respect your own people, and act like a responsible nation. Until you do, the pressure will continue. Are you ready to do the right thing for your people, or will you persist on this dangerous path?
Closing remarks of the debate.
Your words show that you still cling to the logic of bullying and arrogance. You distort the truth and ignore the realities of the region. We are neither pursuing nuclear weapons nor are we terrorists. We are a nation seeking independence, dignity, and justice, resisting your oppression and domination. You speak of pressure and consequences, but the Iranian nation has proven it will not surrender to pressure. We have never bowed to your excessive demands, and we never will. The future belongs to nations that stand on their own feet and defend their rights. You can impose sanctions, you can threaten, but we will continue on the path of progress with reliance on Almighty God and our internal capabilities. What you call a dangerous path is, in truth, the path of Islamic awakening and the revival of human dignity, which will sooner or later bear fruit across the world. Our message is clear. We are a resilient nation, and we will never surrender. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
All right, let's wrap this up. I think everyone's heard what I've said and what Mr. Khamenei has said. I spoke about the facts, about how your regime, Mr. Khamenei, has brought misery to the Iranian people and destabilized the region. You can talk all you want about independence and justice, but the reality is your people are under pressure, your economy is weakened, and you're spending their money to support terrorism around the world. I said America first. That means we defend our interests. We won't let you acquire nuclear weapons and set the region ablaze. We imposed sanctions because there was no other way to force you to change. We want Iran to be a great country, but not a sponsor of terrorism. The choice is yours. As long as you continue down this path, the pressure will continue. I hope one day the Iranian people can live in freedom and prosperity, and that's only possible with a change in your regime. My message is clear. Stop your bad behavior or you'll face the consequences. Done.
And here are the final scores for the debate between these two artificial intelligences.